Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for choosing this session. On behalf of the members of this panel, I hope we meet your expectations. Nevertheless, I'm not really surprised that you're choosing this one. The other one is a good one, but I think it's going to be one of the hottest trending topics in the sector in the next years, because everyone, as we listened in the previous panel, is talking about startups in the business model panel, and everyone is trying to figure out, how can I define my business model if I have to do it by myself, or I should start thinking of which strategic partners, meaning which strategic technological companies can help me solve this issue. My notes here. In my view, we're going from a content-driven business to a service-driven industry. The theme of today's conference is the future of publishing content. I think they should have added the future of publishing content and services. In that new reality, I think you have to start engaging much more closely with technology companies, startups. And that's why we have created this panel in which we have two leading publishers on this side and two innovative leading startups on the other side. We didn't plan this way. Supposedly it was going to be a long table in which the message we want to transmit is that both parties have to speak to each other. But when we got to the room, we had this, separation. I don't know if the organization had in mind this message. At the end, they will hack each other, and that's the message we're going to try to transmit. But initially, this is actually where we're starting from. Publishers are doing their own thing, and startups are doing the other thing. And there is a perception in the market that engaging with the startups is a risky business. And it is true. Startups, by nature, are a risky business. Basically, 1 out of 10 make it to the finish line. The other ones are a failure. But you guys, too, are in a very risky business. Publishing is a very, very risky business. Every year, you guys publish a lot of books. And also, there's a ratio out there that just 1 out of 10 make it. 4 of them, in 2-3 years, basically provide a break even. And the rest, 5 of them, are a big failure. So, in my view, you have much more in common than what you think in terms of the way you focus your businesses and the way you can engage together. I'm a firm believer that publishing has to start engaging with startups as soon as possible, and that's why we're going to have this 45-minute debate. And the way we structure the roundtable is going to be every member of the panel is going to have 3 to 5 initial minutes to tell us, how they engage with the other party, if they engage at all. And then we're going to have a series of question and answers. And then the last 10 minutes, I'm going to give you the mic so you can also be part of this conversation. So I'm going to ask Anna from Valobox. I'm going to skip introductions for the sake of time. You have all that information in your brochures, but Anna has 3 to 5 minutes to tell us how you engage with publishing.
Thanks very much, Javier. Can everybody hear me? No? Okay, there we are. Let's just bring this a bit closer. So Valobox is essentially provides a distribution service for publishers. There are some things that make us quite unique. Sorry. There are things that make us quite unique, which mean that it's different. We're a pay-as-you-go model. We deliver books through a browser, and we give users a huge reward for sharing content, a 25% cut. But essentially, we're working with publishers like a distribution service. So I just kind of wanted to share what makes it much easier in terms of how we work with publishers, because obviously, you're here because you're interested in it. So these are a few kind of tactical things that I've picked up from the last kind of year, really. And the first is kind of just having some kind of standard or at least a process as a publisher which you can communicate to startups to let them know, and I give them an idea of like the timelines, the hurdles that you're going to encounter as someone within your publishing business, because that really helps us in terms of managing our expectations. And it also means that we can help you by having stuff ready in terms of the legal aspects of things or technical integration tools that you might need. The thing that makes a huge difference, and it's really, really boring, but very important, is well-managed files and metadata. I can't tell you how much easier it is to experiment with lots of different models if you have that as a kind of no-brainer, like here's our content, here's our data. You either push to us what you want us to have, or we pull it. Because people like O'Reilly Media, they are just a joy to deal with when it comes to things like that, because you don't have to think about it, you can just automate it all. And having someone in the team that understands those kind of technical elements, even if you don't do it in-house, is also really important, because it means that you can evolve the project. And then, and thinking about doing small, meaningful trials leads directly on from that, because if you want to see if something is successful, you need to give it a good go. So you want to make it as easy as possible to give it a go, but also make sure that you're using content that is in demand by consumers, and that you can then adapt later in terms of expanding that business model across your business or trying it with a different kind of content. So those are the kind of the things that I think have made the biggest difference in the way that we've worked with publishers. So it'd be really interesting to hear, how other people have found that.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Anna. And has it been, listening to you, has it been difficult for a startup to know who is the right person to contact, at a publishing? I mean, it depends on the size. I mean, I imagine if it's a small indie, it's basically a couple of people that are there. But if it's a medium-sized, big size, is it difficult for you to knock on the right door?
It's really difficult. And, job titles don't really mean anything, because you might need to speak to the digital production manager or sales director or anybody. It's really, really hard. I sometimes end up speaking to about 4 different people, and then I'm not even sure if they're talking to each other and they're in the same company. So anything that you can kind of help with on that front, I think it would make it much quicker for everybody.
We'll probably talk more about that, how about structuring the bridges between the startups and the publishing community. Now we're going to have the first delegate from the publishers table, Santos Palazzi from Planeta. Welcome.
Javier. Oh, thank you, Javier. Do you hear me? Yes? Okay. First, I want to start with some thinking, is that for us, the e-books stands for electronic, of course, electronic books, but also for experimentation. And experimentation and innovation is clearly the best arena where startups and publishers can collaborate. And a big warning, and it's beware of startups that only are born or developed to raise money and exit. We've seen some of them, and we have to differentiate between different startups. Yeah? They should have a clear business model, and one business model is just getting a commission from something they do for publishers. So I see 3 very clear areas of collaboration between publishers and startups. First is the one that Anna mentioned, clearly, information systems and procedures, digital asset management, data mining, rights accounting and administration, digital distribution of files. Yeah, for example, in Spain, there was no digital distributor for e-books to retailers. So what we did is to join forces between different publishers and build up a new company called Libranda. And Libranda is today delivering 80%, 90% of the digital files to all national and international retailers. So this is one of the axes or areas. Second is content transformation. Because publishers we've done books the same way in the last 500 years. So making an EPUB is not an easy job, but enriching content and doing an EPUB 3 or KF8 or whatever the name of the new file is not so easy. So we think that partnering with third parties, startups, and this is something we are already doing at Planeta, is something that makes sense, because those partners know much better how to evolve and how to handle those transformations. Transmedia, for example, is the new frontier. We just read this 2-3 days ago that Penguin is joining forces with Amber Entertainment for a transmedia project called Atlantis. So we think that if a publisher wants a movie or a TV series to be aired or to be produced, somebody else will have to. This publisher have to join forces with somebody else. And the third axis, and this is the last, is reaching new readers and knowing them better. This is an area where the publisher is still in the first stages, and we are in the middle of the transformation. We are coming from a business-to-business model. We put books. We used to put books on bookstores, and we forget about them. There were some readers, but we didn't know them. And now it's a business-to-consumer model. We should know much better our consumers. And because we don't have this consumer insight information at the company, there might be some startups, some companies that can provide this knowledge and this know-how and get in. Another example, one example of how to reach new readers is by joining forces with international companies like Open Road Media, for example. We know how to market and we know how to address Spanish reading consumers, but if we want our authors to go abroad to be translated, especially in a very difficult market where only a small amount of what is published in the States is non-US or UK writers, then we need a partner. And for example, Open Road is somebody who will help publishers all over the world to bring their authors to US market.
Okay.
This is
Thank you, Santos. I think it was very interesting because you mentioned 3 business processes, the whole internal administration, the content transformation, and reaching new audiences. And in the study that we recently published, we noticed that there was a high concentration of startups basically offering publishing the same thing around marketing. And I think there is a business opportunity on the startup side if they're able to sit down with you, publishers, and say, which is the business pain, which is the business problem you have today that you know is not working, and which technology can help you resolve that. Out of those 3 problems that you mentioned, internal processes, content transformation, reaching new audiences in markets that you're not well located yet, which to you will be the one that startups should focus to provide you a solution to a business problem that you have today? Out of your mind, I mean.
To me, for me today, I would choose for. That depends very much on what kind of publisher you are. If you're a small publisher, maybe the first one, those administrative and production issues and procedure issues are key. But we have solved already that. Metadata is something we are used to work now. But so as a medium-sized company, let's say, for me the biggest challenge today is consumer reach, consumer insight.
So going from B2B to B2C, exactly. And you need a B2C technology that really helps you understand market.
We've been working with bookstores, but I've never worked with directly with readers. So what kind of language, what kind of tools do we need to get to know them and to engage them? Engagement has been said before, so this is, to me, the pending issue.
Okay. So if there's any startups in the room, you have a business opportunity right there. So we're going to talk to the startup delegation, and Henrik has the 3 to 5 minute.
Thanks for that excellent pass, because one thing we do at Readmill, obviously, is help publishers and retailers reconnect with readers around the world. So there is great business opportunity there together with us. So one of the services that we provide is to increase the user experience for people that are shopping direct with retailers and publishers around the world on the web and on mobile by offering kind of a one-click from buying to reading on all major platforms when you buy an ebook. And so with this, we've obviously, over the last year, worked with a lot of different publishers and a lot of different retailers. And there's a few common trends, and it's really interesting because what Richard Nash mentioned with experimentation is what's important. With a startup, you gotta have very small iterations where you experiment with a lot of different things to realize what works and what doesn't work. And the most important thing on these iterations is that you gotta optimize to do as many of them as possible before you run out of venture capital, because that increases your chances a lot. And so the most important thing is speed. So in startup land, maybe it takes a couple of weeks to do an iteration to figure out if something really works. But if you're then dependent on a publisher, which takes months or maybe even in some cases years to figure out what they want to do, you maybe only have one shot, right? And if you only have one shot, that's not really a good business to be in, right? So speed is extremely important, I think, when working together and kind of establishing and synchronizing those values around the speed and being able to kind of make a leap of faith or try something that would make or break a hypothesis that you have. So the things that we've been most successful with has had a very clear offering, things that we've been offering to publishers, very, very clear value from the start, like as little fussiness as possible. And also coming not only from the content perspective, like a lot of startups that are in books today are focusing only on content, but there's a lot of other opportunities as well out there, like marketing, for example, like insights and analytics, for example, that I think is still very much underexplored. So trying to create not only integration on content side, but also on other things can actually help kind of bring startups and publishers closer together. But the kind of general trend that we see is that the larger the publisher, the slower the speed. And maybe it has something to do with what you mentioned, and I was like, there's no real title, so you don't know who to talk to. So if it takes a few weeks only to find the right person, well then already there you have kind of a problem. But also, of course, bigger companies, I mean, they take a bigger risk making a bet on a smaller player. So maybe it's not a publishing problem so much as a problem with kind of smaller businesses dealing with bigger businesses in general. But how do we make sure that publishers and especially kind of excel at working with smaller businesses? That's a big challenge going forward.
Very, very interesting, Henrik, because I think it has been mentioned across the day today, this whole issue about speed and experimentation at the same time. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that many publishers have done when experimenting with the startups is that the variables they select to measure success might not be the right ones. I mean, you basically in your introduction mentioned that look, for example, for insights, analytics. What are you learning in the whole process that you're doing this pilot, this experimentation beyond sales? Could you, based on your experience, could you signal, other things to measure beyond sales in this experimentation? Because most likely because of the small amount of content that's going to be put on your technology, the timing that is going to be tested, sales is not going to be the key variable to measure, isn't it?
No, I mean that's only one. I mean in startups, especially in technology, we look a lot at funnels, like how a user's journey through a service happens, basically, and where do they kind of drop off, and where do they get highly engaged, and so on. I mean, obviously, the point of sale is only the first step of that, or maybe the view is the first step. Point of sale is maybe the second, but there's lots of like deeper engagement levels you can measure down the funnel now that we have kind of a digital landscape to measure in. I mean, obviously, if they read the book or not is I think is a great measuring point. How much time they spent in it, and there's obviously other type of engagement metrics that we focus a lot on, like highlights, for example, or commentary within the book. Obviously, recommendations and reviews is a big thing, but also the amount of things that people share around the book and the mentions that happens in other type of contexts and in other services. And we're still not there in terms of kind of building that ecosystem, but we are well underway. So it's all about figuring out a few simple things that answers some of the questions that publishers have, instead of saying like, oh, we have lots of data, because data is not really worth anything unless it leads to insight. And I think that's the main disconnect between tech companies and publishers, that we kind of think that we can just deliver like, oh, here's a heap of data, here's value out there for you. And they're just like, what is that? What do I do with this? Because they're not trained in kind of analytics and that and those kind of things. So I think it's actually up to us as startups to kind of deliver, really boil it down to insights, and really deliver a few key actionable metrics that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, we'll come back to that. The startup becoming a partner to the publisher in order to help them understand the digital landscape. We're going back to the publisher's side for this first round. We're doing good. On time. We're going to get you out of lunch by 1:30 as promised, okay? So don't get nervous. So now we're going to give the 3-minute slot to Molly Barton from Penguin.
Thank you, Javier. So I work with startups in a couple of different ways at Penguin. I work with external startups in collaboration with the sales teams, the marketing teams, and then the digital publishing teams within Penguin, and they focus on 3 different areas of startups. Startups that are working on marketing solutions or discoverability, startups that are working on alternative distribution or consumption models, and then startups that are innovating on the product itself, what the digital reading experience is like. And then I also work on startups that are funded by Penguin. So I started a company called Book Country within Penguin that was funded by Pearson Innovation Funding to try to change the way that writers give writers a place to collaborate and write the best book that they can, and then open up different pathways, whether they want to self-publish or traditionally publish. That doesn't matter, really. It's about bringing writers together. And then Penguin is invested in Bookish in New York and in eBooks by Sainsbury's here in London. So it's just 2 different ways of investing in innovation. Some is investing in external startups with your time and counsel and experiments, and then the other is actually funding new ventures. So I guess I wanted to talk about a few things that some of my colleagues on the panel have raised. One is clarity around what you're experimenting with and trying to identify whether it is discoverability, product, or distribution that you're focusing on, because you need to talk to different people within the publishing house to get a pilot going. And then really importantly, focusing on a pilot, not this is a forever commitment, because that's where the risk comes in, especially for a big publisher. And in order to make a pilot effective, you need to focus on a content area and not say whatever titles you feel like experimenting with. It needs to be directly related to the problem that you're trying to solve. If you're interested in people who read 8 to 10 books a week because you want to focus on consumption, then maybe you should be trying to get romance titles from publishers. But it's like going into a job interview and saying, I just want to work. You need to say like, I'm suited for this, or this business model is suited for experimenting with this title set because, and then here's what we think that we can get out of it. So identifying for the person that you're talking to in the publishing house what the key performance indicators are going to be for the pilot, and how long you want the pilot to be, and how to get their titles back out of it if it doesn't work. And then coming up with a way to bring audience so that the pilot is worthwhile. So I think that's a big concern for bigger publishers, is if we spend all the time, with you identifying the titles, contracting with you for the pilot, how are you going to ensure that readers come to it, and how can you collaborate with the publisher to make sure that that happens? And then to address the thing that Anna was saying about sort of decision-making and process, I make a comparison to an editorial meeting, which is a very familiar meeting for publishers. You get all the right people in the room. You have the publisher there. You have the editors who are pitching different ideas. And then you've got, potentially rights and sales and other people helping you assess the opportunity. I would say, consider setting up a meeting like that with your digital sales, your marketing people, your product people, and then probably your legal people, your rights people, to all look at, the group of opportunities that your different teams are considering, and bring all the right feedback into that discussion to speed up the decision-making process.
Very interesting. Based on your experience, because you have met a lot of startups currently in your new responsibility, do they have an understanding of your sector? Do they have an understanding of your business pains? Do they have an understanding of what you need in general? Or
I would say your study that found that there's a higher proportion of startups focusing on marketing is probably accurate, in the sense that discoverability is the biggest problem as you move away from physical bookstores into digital. So in that sense, we're doing well. Though I would say there's a lot of overlap and a lot of startups attacking the same problems. And so I encourage them to talk to each other and try to refine and do some competitive depositioning. Like if you're thinking about subscription, why are you thinking about subscription and how are you approaching it and how can I do it differently? So I think that's important. Though I do think there's a lot of applying consumption models that work for music or movies or other sectors to books without, sort of deep thinking about what makes reading different from other experiences.
I would agree. This will be a question for everyone. We'll start now this second round of Q&A, but any one of you can jump in and add or ask a question to the other party, okay? But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this question, because I think the media has gone through this restructuring process, and I think you guys in the publishing community are going to go through it very soon. Should I create a spin-off as a publisher to deal with digital and have digital minds running the relationship with the startups and come back 3 years from now and hopefully with a profitable, successful business? Or should I integrate, those people, that team within the traditional, in the good sense of the word, structure and do it on a parallel basis? What's your opinion? We're going to start with the publishers and then we're going to have the other.
I feel really strongly about this. No, you shouldn't separate digital from the rest of your business, because then you end up disadvantaging the people who are not in that digital organization because they're not connected to the future. So I think it has to be integrated, but I also think you need to make structural adjustments so that everyone is tasked with experimentation. Because if you make a few people responsible for experimentation, then they keep bumping up against this organization that's focused on the big channels in the already existing business, you're never going to get traction.
Interesting.
I disagree with that.
Good. As I said, there's not right or wrong answer, so good.
No, I disagree, but just based on my experience. Because I've seen, from what I'm seeing, I'm not talking about Planeta, but talking about the Spanish industry as a whole, the Spanish publishing industry, is that they are approaching the digital market from a very defensive point of view. So they think that they are risking their original business model, so they are very reluctant to change. And every move we do in digital, of course, we have to take into account, as you were mentioning, what is the impact on the traditional model. But a lot of times we end up with no move as a consequence. So we propose, there's a lot of proposals coming from startups or coming from within, but at the end of the day, it's the people who's deciding. It's very much focused on the traditional market, which is today what is bringing money in. So I think that having a spin-off will definitely speed up things. But on the contrary, you cannot have two very different teams,
right,
because they will end up battling between them.
Killing each other.
I'll add two things to that subject. One is, I think anytime you're trying to bring innovation into an organization, whether it's digital or supply chain or whatever it is important to break off a team who gets to focus on that and work deeply on it and not have to justify the time that they're spending on it. I mean, I was very fortunate when I was working on book country, which involves self-publishing, and this was 4 years ago, if I had to justify the work that I was doing on that project every week, I would have been exhausted. I wouldn't have been able to actually make it happen. So I was allowed to have a confidential project. So I think that allowing teams to go off and innovate and come back, whether it's digital or some other aspect of the business that you're trying to change, is really important. And I do think it's important to, I just think separating digital from the rest of the business is risky if you're talking, broadly about the structure of the company. I think it actually could be important to task certain people with communicating and teaching and getting your HR teams and your other sort of educational aspects of the company involved to make sure that the work those little teams are doing is fed out into the rest of the organization.
I suggest that because you're going to go through this decision-making process of how to do it, look outside our sector. Look into the financial community, look into the telco community, how they have dealt with this issue. Some of them have created a spin-off company. Well, we have seen it also in the publishing sector. We have seen Nuke and Barton Noble going, on different brands, different teams, different locations, New York, San Francisco. And the other alternative, you put it on the table, having clear business objectives and clear business processes in order that both parties communicate to each other. But I would like to hear the impressions from the other side of the story. What do you prefer, spin-off?
From the issues that we've experienced, like my company, I think I'm kind of tempted by some kind of separation, simply because when you're experimenting, what makes it really hard and a lot slower is when you have a lot of legacy issues to deal with or legacy systems that you're building stuff with. So when a publisher gives us files, even if they're EPUB files that were made kind of 2 or 3 years ago, the way they've been made often means they don't have the source files, or they can't adapt them, or then they're a bit broken, or that kind of thing, which makes everything later on a lot harder. Whereas if you could start with a kind of digital first set of content with authors who are already engaged and in that mindset, so you don't have to kind of negotiate with them and do all that again, that sometimes can mean the experimentation bit is a bit better. I'm not sure, publishers kind of have imprints anyway. You could maybe focus on one of the imprints taking that on, but I do sometimes feel like the legacy issues can make things feel a lot more complicated than I think they need to be.
Henrik, any opinion on this?
Yeah, I definitely think that spin-off seems like not a very good decision. It seems like a short-term solution to a problem that needs to be handled long-term, right? You don't want to separate the company into two parts where, one has this tremendous, legacy is kind of you can treat legacy in two ways. But from my perspective, that legacy of creating books and sourcing authors and bringing excellent books to the world and to the people of this world. That you can't separate the digital part of a company from that kind of core. It just seems like wrong. We could probably gain a little bit of speed short term, but I don't see how that's kind of worth it. Books is a long-term play.
Okay.
It's not another Instagram or something like that.
Good. We'll come back to that. That was a good comment, but Molly has a comment.
In response to both of those remarks, I would say the problem with starting fresh, as it were, with digital-only titles or titles that aren't bound up by legacy issues is that chances are you're probably not dealing with the highest profile books, and in order to get a proper experiment, you need to attract readers to the new form or the new channel or the new whatever it is. So I'm always sort of in that battle of, it would be much easier if we went to the digital first imprint, but we really want traction with readers, so we want big names in there.
Yeah, I think it's always a balance. I'm just trying to think of ways that you can sometimes get rid of the obstacles that don't necessarily need to be there. Sometimes you can, and like Henrik says, there's a legacy there that's very, very valuable that you wouldn't ever want to lose. Mm-hmm. And I think having skills across the company is really beneficial because more people understand what is going on. But I do sometimes feel you get hung up sometimes on trying to innovate with content, which is actually very difficult to innovate with because it's older, or the files or the technology made to create it is just a bit outdated.
Okay, let me add a topic to the debate that I think it will enrich the whole conversation. In my conversations with many publishers, they say, Javier, yeah, it's true, but a lot of startups, I have the perception they're not here to stay. They're thinking more about their exit strategy of making quick money and moving next. And you're telling me that I have to start engaging with this, and what happens if this company disappears 2 years from now, or even worse, is bought by my competition? We have just recently seen Amazon buying Goodreads. Why you guys transmit that perception to the publishing community that you're not here to stay, that you're not here for business, that you're here just for your own good exit strategy?
Henrik?
As you can see, the questions were not planned. I did not give them questions in advance. Okay, you need water?
No,
Okay,
I'm fine.
They have much more water and much more space over there.
I think there is a general misconception here. I mean, again, the last panel on the main stage, they talked about kind of venture capital and return, and one startup out of 10 makes 10x the money. I think it's actually one startup out of 100. Mm-hmm. So yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of people are talking about exits and so on, and it also gets kind of overhyped in the press when people say, everybody's interested in price tag and so on. I just would like to say that if any entrepreneur that wants to make money would go into books, I think that's not a very good play. So I can't speak for the general entrepreneur, but for us, it's really about changing the way people consume and read books, and getting access to more and greater things to read.
Very good.
Yeah, I'd echo that and just add that you do have to be really passionate about what you do as a startup and be willing to fail, and that takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of energy as well to be kind of trying to convince everybody to give things a go. And yeah, I can see why some publishers would be wary about acquisitions and that kind of thing. But I mean, I can just speak for our company. We're not interested in just selling out as soon as we can or anything like that, because to create a really good product, you need to have something which is kind of has integrity to it, and that users can go and feel like they're being engaged with properly and getting a good experience from it. And I think if you've always got your eye on something over there, especially when it comes to books and people get really passionate about that, then you can come across as disingenuous, and I think people pick up on that. So I don't know. I think it's a shame that there's maybe that perception, but I don't think it's true of certainly a lot of the startups that I know.
Let me add just something quick here. I mean, it's a little bit of the chicken and egg problem also. These publishers is like, I don't want to bet on the company because they might go away, but I mean that's a self-fulfilling right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work. Like if you don't make the bet, they will definitely sell because they don't have any other choice. And I mean, despite what everybody else thinks, like when you sell your company, that's a bit of a failure. You want to create something long-lasting. You want to create something that exists for hundreds and hundreds of years, like a publisher, for example. That's success, for me at least.
Yeah, no, to be fair, I mean, in my experience of working together with the startups for the last 20 years, I will recommend you that instead of focusing on the technology they're putting on the table today, these people tend to have a very bright mind. If they have been able to figure out that technology that they're telling you to test today, ask them about what they're thinking about the next one. Because they probably have a couple of other ideas in their mind that once they get this one on the go, they will start doing it. So when you engage with a startup, of course, talk about today, the present, the technology, the company they're proposing to you, but ask them about what's next and invest in the next one, because most likely that will be the one that will really transform your business. We have the last 10 minutes, so the idea is that if there is any question on the floor, you can be part of this conversation. If not, I will continue with my questioning, but there's one question here. Thank you.
Question for the publishers, really. We hear a lot about how publishing is really slow, especially from the startup community, but I wonder whether you're slow or whether you're just selective, and whether you need to be selective because there are so many startups now with new business models that are going to change our future?
Well, I think there are a number of different reasons for that perception. And some of it is not having the process that we were just talking about, a clear sort of inbound, these are all the companies pitching us, and here are all the ideas, and everyone who needs to consider them get in a room, goes department by department. So if I'm championing a startup, I end up having 7 or 8 meetings with different departments to talk about the idea, and then I need the startup to come in and meet people. So there's if it's going well, there's a long process. And if it's going badly, there's a lot of unanswered emails. And that is partly because the volume of inquiry is so high, and the overlap between the startups can be quite significant. But some of it is not having that defined process that exists for editorial. But even editorial acquisitions, don't happen unless it's some really hot property. Don't happen overnight because you need to read, you need to consider it. So that process of consideration is still being refined, I think, in most houses.
From my experience, when we are approached by startups, most of the time, the solution they propose are not properly valued. So there's not a business plan going together with the solution. So we come back to them. We say, okay, can we just do some numbers, and we can provide you with required information to put those numbers together. So when they come back the second time, they realize this is going nowhere. So the business model they are proposing us sometimes is even not it's not a business model. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I would add two things to what Santos is saying. One is often there are contractual issues that publishers have either with their existing suppliers or with their authors that are intractable. And so no matter how interested they are in collaborating with the startup, unless the startup tweaks the approach, they won't be able to move forward. So that trying to get traction in that communication and say, if you move this way and you did it this way, we could work with you, I think is a really important piece of the conversation, but that advice isn't always heeded. And then the other thing that I think can be a problem is pivoting. It's important for startups to pivot and try different things, but unless there's clear communication about when a pivot is happening and why and how it connects to the original intention of the business, I've experienced, a loss of trust in the executives that I'm trying to get to collaborate with a startup because they're like, but this company was doing that. Why are they doing that now? How is it connected? I don't want to work with them anymore because I don't know what they're doing. So, publishing is a loyalty-based business, and clarity around the path that you're on, I think, is really important.
No, I think it was a very good point. Sometimes we tend to criticize a lot the publisher community for not innovating, but I find out in the last 2 years that startups are not innovating a lot either. I mean, they came up with this subscription service with $9.99 and no one else is doing nothing else. I think there's a lot of room to do a lot of things. 2 more minutes before we go to lunch, but I realized that we have like 2 big publishers on the table, Planeta and Penguin. A lot of you might be thinking, they have the resources, they have the structure to engage with the startups. What's your opinion about open innovation? We've seen it in many, many other sectors, whereas, small, medium-sized companies, they get together and they identify a business problem and a business need, and they go to market and they find technologies that resolve that business need. Why don't we have that kind of collaboration, maybe led by one of the big publishers, to go together to market to find the right technology to solve the business problem? Why we're not collaborating?
It sounds like a great idea. I mean,
it's done in the healthcare sector, transportation, finance. I have not invented it. I mean, it's something that is out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of publishers do face the same problem, so it would make sense a lot of the time for them to kind of look for a solution collectively. I guess it's if we're talking about speed, I guess that sometimes puts something in the way of moving forward if you're trying to kind of get everybody to agree. But I mean, there have been, there's people in the UK like the IPG and Independent Alliance who seem to do a good job of coordinating people around digital issues. So I think, places like that might be a good place to start.
Okay, any other question? Yes, one question there, and then we go to lunch.
Hi, my name is Laurie Kay. Just a quick comment, really. There are publishers, I think, here in the UK who are, sharing content. I'm not here to advocate them in particular, but who are sharing content through APIs. And I think a lot of publishers are beginning to look at how can we sort of foster sharing and collaboration and creating sort of derivative products downstream. And I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more of.
Good to know. Good to know. Any other? Because that was a quick comment. Well, thank you very much for both sides of the panelists, and have a good lunch.